Double, triple, ultra monster kill.
Greetings from Pintpot. Today I'm going to be taking a look at the Ranger, which is a vehicle secondary weapon, an anti-aircraft flak cannon. Now, with the current meta of the game heavily dominated by air, particularly Liberators, having good anti-aircraft is more important than ever. But the Ranger has a reputation of being a genuinely dreadful weapon. As a result, it was recently revamped by Zoe, increasing its magazine size from 32 to 70 and increasing its damage. Now, the alternative anti-aircraft secondary weapon is the Walker, which is an anti-aircraft machine gun. Now, if we look at the old numbers for the Ranger before the revamp, you can see that the Ranger's damage was incredibly poor. Its magazine size was lousy, and increasing its ammo capacity gave you about one more bullet. Now, with the new revamped Ranger, it's much more comparable in damage to the Walker, though obviously still weaker. Also, in terms of spare ammo, it has a much more sensible number. So is it any good now? And the answer is, in terms of its damage and magazine size, it's actually in a pretty good place. Given how much easier it is to hit with a flak cannon than it is with a machine gun, the fact it takes about 50% longer to kill with a Ranger versus the Walker is perfectly justifiable. So what is the Ranger good at now? Well, it is very dangerous to ESFs which are nearby. It provides reasonable but not exceptional damage versus Liberators and Galaxies. However, against a dedicated Liberator which is attempting to tank buster you, it is not a viable defense. For this, you're much better for the Walker, but even the Walker by itself can't take on a Liberator. Therefore, the Ranger's primary role is to be part of an overall air defense consisting of multiple flak cannons. That is, if it's to be effective enough to actually take down the aircraft it's targeting. However, one of the greatest weaknesses the weapon has is its bullet velocity. Now, the Walker has a velocity of 750 meters per second, whilst the Ranger has a velocity of only 325 meters per second, the same as a max flak cannon. This means that against targets which are further away, it becomes very ineffective because it's extremely hard to hit them. Not only do you have to give a target a massive amount of lead, but if they do any jinxing or turning in the meantime, you're going to miss them. Which is not to say it's entirely ineffective versus enemy aircraft, particularly ESFs at longer distances. As a pilot, being hit by flak is extremely off-putting, particularly for ESFs. Therefore, as you can see from the clip, I don't have to do any real damage to these ESFs to drive them away. All it requires is a hit or two for them to start to scramble. But you're never going to kill a target at these longer ranges. All you can do is spook them. And this is one of the primary advantages of having a much bigger magazine size. When trying to deter enemy air, if you have a large magazine size and keep on firing at them, it continues to be off-putting and force them to maneuver. This is even if hardly any of the shells actually hit the target. Therefore, increasing the magazine size from 32 to 70 and the ammo capacity from about 150 to 700 makes the world of difference to this weapon. But its slow bullet velocity means it's only genuinely effective at close distances. So what is it best used for? In my opinion, it sits best on a Sundra, protecting infantry which are spawning. In these instances, you're primarily concerned about stopping enemy aircraft getting too near to your infantry and starting to farm them. Therefore, the new version of the Ranger with a larger magazine size and damage is very effective against ESFs trying to lolpod you. And it provides good support DPS against Liberators tank bustering you, but it's very reliant on a Walker to do the real damage. These two weapons combined on a Sundra can be incredibly dangerous to this very tough opponent. However, the limitations of its effective range does have a consequence in terms of its use, and that is, you don't really kill very much with it. It does its job best when it's simply driving away enemy aircraft. If you've also got air cover which pick off damaged enemy planes, you'll get plenty of assists, but really very few kills. So it's incredibly rewarding to use it in terms of supporting your side, but very unrewarding in terms of experience. So is the new revamped Ranger in a good place? I actually think it's a pretty reasonable weapon now, but really to become viable at longer distances it needs higher bullet velocity. However, it is definitely not the utter garbage we were used to for the previous year. So if you're into your Sundras, this is not at all a bad addition to stick one of these onto your Sundra and protect all those very vulnerable spawned infantry. If you enjoyed this episode or found it interesting, please feel free to thumbs up, thumbs down, comment or subscribe as appropriate. In the meantime, have a good one, happy hunting, and Pintpot out.